Hi, this is Phil at Canyon Soundwave, and I've got a question for you today. Would you rather? Would you rather have a two-way loudspeaker system created by a designer with a great set of ears and no measurements, or one created with exceptional measurement tools only without the use of any ears? So think about that for a second. If you have a master builder just using their ears versus a master technician using measurement tools only, which would you choose? So this is an interesting question to me because I see it in the YouTube community, in the audio community, and it's interesting because on the one hand, you have measurement aficionados who swear by measurements, and you have another set of people arguing for you know a traditional ear-tuned system often. And I think it's interesting because that middle group of people who look at the strengths of both different ways of looking at a system seems kind of small. Maybe it's because I hear the voices of dissent, but um, you know, both methods have their own strengths and weaknesses, and so measurements can do things and observe aspects of the sound that we can't readily hear, and we can hear things that can't be easily measured as well. Um, Frequency curves and even more elaborate measurement data don't tell you the whole story that your ear perceives. And some examples of this are the time domain. So, looking at a frequency curve, we don't get a sense of how long a note lingers on the cone. So while we see what that tone is at an instant, that lingering tone can bleed into other tones. So the time domain is relevant. Power compression. So the way that uh, frequency measurements are handled is that usually the speaker that's being measured, the loudspeaker that's being measured, is producing a low volume, and it doesn't necessarily reflect what you're going to see in the frequency data when it's played at the volume that you would be using at home. So there's a difference there. It's called power compression. It can pretty radically change the frequency characteristics of a loudspeaker. Electrical phase angle and impedance demands. So a frequency sweep or a frequency or a more elaborate 360-degree, very detailed analysis of the frequency data of a loudspeaker doesn't tell you anything about the impedance demands that loudspeaker has. So those will interact with the amplifier that you're using and also potentially change how it sounds. Um, Frequency data often doesn't tell us much or anything about harmonic distortion or the timbre and tonal quality of the speaker that we're using. Um, you know, if I'm using a paper cone or an aluminum cone or a magnesium alloy cone or beryllium or whatever material, they all have their own tonal qualities. And while the speakers can measure the same, they still don't sound the same. And then maybe most importantly is that one of the blind spots of measurement is the room interaction. Even with DSP systems that correct for the room, uh, you know only you really know how you operate and move around in your room, what positions that you sit in, uh, what you expect. Do you get up and dance when your music is playing? Are you off axis? Are you on axis? Or are you sitting in a chair exactly in a particular listening position? So These are things that don't come across in measurements either. Um, Luckily, we don't have to choose between a system built solely by ear or one built strictly by measurement numbers. So I would say that human perception is unarguably the ultimate arbiter of performance. So, we're going to be listening to our system. And so it really is all about hearing it. And although measurements kind of level set the field, so that a designer doesn't design their perfect speaker from their specific set of ears, it does take into account some of the things that don't come across in measurements. So a really good set of ears is very valuable. Um, and it's really important to pay attention to the physics and component synergy, regardless of what path that we're using, to maximize our potential for success in any new system design. So that should be sound regardless of what path we're on. So sometimes when I hear, comments like, I don't care if it's a copper penny, or pardon me, a steel penny connecting, my wire to my terminal. I do. I want good components the design needs to be sound. And that's why, at least in the designs that I'm making, sound design is the tent pole. And as an independent builder, I do not have access to really expensive measuring equipment. And while it would be nice to have some of those things, um, I don't know that I would change things a whole lot. I do put a lot of trust and value in my ears. And, it takes a lot of time to tune using your ears. And uh, you definitely want to get opinions from others as you go. And but it gives you the flexibility to move it from room to room, change locations, try different things, and then listen to them so that you can get a sense of whether that's working for you. But upfront design, if we've made really good decisions early on in a new design, we can avoid most of the problems that we'd have to solve electrically, right? So this is the Rube Goldberg device, and we don't want a loudspeaker that is overly complex, and that will work against us in the end. This is a Magico A5 crossover, very expensive crossover with absolutely exceptional parts. You know, but we look at the inductors or capacitors on this crossover, and while they're beautiful, if you're a technician, they have their own beauty. They're even more beautiful if they're not there. Honestly, no matter how great the quality of your crossover parts are, the best quality is not needing a part in the first place. So its absence is better than its presence. And that gets us to things that, measurement tools um, and design can help us with that are difficult to hear. And one of those things is phase. So, phase issues are notoriously challenging to hear, especially when they're, not uh, ultra significant, but maybe just kind of creeping effects from parts that we've added or design choices that we've made. And so here are some best practices that I've employed to design the Ocotillos, and I just employ period. So I'm looking for component synergy. So I think about what crossover I may be using and those crossover parts before I even think of what drivers to select. And then the the drivers need to be complementary. They need to work together. I want drivers that want to play together in a two-way system, not ones that are either going to fight each other or have breakup and frequency limitations that are going to cause problems, particularly in the crossover region. Um, and those phase issues are really important. And so where we place our drivers, how close they are one to the other, is really important in combination with the consideration of the crossover frequency, because the lower that we go in our crossover frequency, that increases the wavelength. And so we have more flexibility when we're using a lower crossover frequency as far as phase is concerned. And then we want to use a phase coherent crossover slope. And I guess what we consider the most perfect absolute phase coherent crossovers would be the first order and the fourth order. But I will always argue that the second order is every bit as phase coherent, because the two drivers with a shift with a flip in polarity will end up being uh, perfectly in phase on a relative basis. And what I found out mathematically is that the delay, the electrical delay to the tweeter, is insignificant to the phase when you look at the actual waves and their lengths. Um, we want minimal electrical components. So if we have to add filters, if we have to add um, Zobels and baffle step compensation networks, and deal with a lot more componentry, we're going to be shifting or rotating our phase. So the simpler our design, the better. So this is really important to make sure our drivers don't require those things, that we've looked at where they're going to be active in the design, and that we don't anticipate that there's going to be a need for a filter. We don't anticipate a need for even a Zobel or baffle step compensation if we can avoid it. And then I always focus on perfect or near perfect z-axis alignment on a flat baffle. And the way that I achieve this is that I'm using Mark Audio uh, full range drivers, which have a shallow cone, and I'm able to find rather easily matching tweeters with nearly exact offsets where their sound originates from the baffle on a flat baffle. So that definitely helps us with phase as well. So again, phase is hard to hear. Um, if we know that our measurement tools like mine are not the best, then I want to make sure that I've done everything I possibly can to make sure that phase is going to be very, very precise. And some things to avoid. So things I avoid is reaching for numbers. So when I'm doing a design, it's really tempting to want to reach low, because that's what is kind of prevalent today, is really a very, very extended low end. And I don't let myself do that. I don't let myself chase either sensitivity, high sensitivity, or low end extension. Um, I work to make sure that there's lots of body and continuity in the sound from top to bottom. And using a second order crossover, I have a lot of overlap, and that enriches the experience of the sound. So it's all about the synergy for me between the drivers. So I don't reach for those numbers, because if I were to do so, I would probably need steeper crossovers, and it would kind of, everything that I'm doing would kind of crumble. It just is against the philosophy of the designs that I'm building. Choosing components in isolation. So it's really tempting to say, "Oh, I've got this great idea for this tweeter. I love this woofer. Let's come up with a crossover that will make them work together." I don't do that. So instead, I look at how they're supposed to work together. And I look at my options and I make some trades, sometimes difficult ones. I was just recently comparing two drivers. I really wanted one to win because I liked the aesthetic of one driver over another. But you know, the other one was clearly better because I wouldn't need a baffle step compensation network. And there was a few other things as well with the impedance curve. So I won't choose two drivers that I like and make them work together. Instead, I think about how they should ideally work together and then choose my drivers after I've kind of come up with that ideal. And then adding components that rotate phase. So we want to keep the um, crossover components to a minimum. Keep that phase as consistent as possible. And we don't want to complicate our amplifier power and musical dynamics either. So these are just some basic ideas that kind of serve as guidelines for me and might help you as well if you're building or you're just interested in what I'm doing. So that's it. If you've got some feedback or other ideas or things that I forgot to put into this presentation, drop a comment. Love to hear from you, and I hope this has been helpful to you. And have a good one. See you on the other side.